Hi everybody, it's Mahmood here. Hope you're all bearing up as best you can. Excuse the low-tech version here, just quickly cobbled this together. So there's bound to be one or two bloopers and mess-ups here. I've been instructed to look at the camera, so I've been told to make sure, keep a good careful eye. Head's going to be sort of up and down. I've made some notes in terms of some of the things we're going to talk about. Just give me a minute or two just to sort some tech out. Let's advantage to older age. Let's get the ticker out. So comments are on there. Hi Joe, hi Melissa, Katna, and everybody else. Just to let you know, this is being recorded in theory. So we are live. So if you need to nip out, get a glass of wine, get some fortitude, etc., you're more than welcome. So if you could just give me a thumbs up in the comments box just to make sure that I'm not just speaking to myself and the sound is coming through. I'll just see if there's any activity on the comments box, and we're ready to go in a minute or two. So hopefully it's all coming through. There's some sound. I can see we've got Ishi, Eminem, Melissa, Joe, sound only. Hello. Hi JJ and Pams. Do we have visuals, everybody? Do we have visuals? We've got sound. You probably want to just listen to the sound as opposed to see my ugly mug anyway. Sound only. Kate Kimber, hi. Sound only. Give me a couple of things to do. I'm sure I'm probably doing something really rubbish. So it's sound. Just talk amongst yourselves for a second. So we've got sound. So what's going on with this here? Hi Joe. No visuals, Ishi. Again, just talk amongst yourselves for a second or two. So Nico, thank you. Good to see you. So video and audio, good. What I'll do, everybody, I'll give it a minute or two to see if it kicks in. Pam, thank you for the thumbs up. So I would imagine with my rubbish knowledge of tech, if some people are getting it, I'm going to distance myself and saying, just check your connections. Perfect. Sound and vision, JJ. So let's crack on. So listen, how's everybody been? I know it's been a real, there might be a little bit of swearing here that's going on here. We're all adults. It's a bit of a financial shitstorm at the moment in terms of a lot of people, myself included. So I hope you're all bearing up. And what I'm going to focus on tonight, there's a bit of a sort of a news at 10 ticker tape at the bottom. That's what I'm intending to look at tonight. As I said, there will be a recording. We have got the usual details on the blog. Hopefully all of you have been getting out mailers. You're probably getting sick to death of us mailing you every 5 minutes here. But we're just trying to keep on top of the news story and cut through the flack and give you some real sort of hands-on stuff that's going to be useful itself. If for any reason you're not on our mailing list, you don't have to be a client, by the way, to be on there. We're not sharing any confidential secrets. Just send me a message after this. We'll make sure you've added onto the mailer and direct you there as well. Now, before we carry on, okay, I'm going to break this session down here. Every now and again, I'll be looking at the comments box here. Is the stuff that we know, the stuff that we think we know, and there's stuff that we haven't got a clue on here. So there's lots of chatter. There's lots of people saying, I can get X, what about Y, and all the rest of it. Let me just sort of lay cards out here. We're in a very much a rolling news story here. So lots of government announcements that are being made. They make the big announcements, which is great. So for example, like cash grants, and then the detail has not yet been sorted out. I've literally just checked my information about half an hour ago. So hopefully most of it's correct. Probably tomorrow morning it's going to change anyway. So we're going to look at cash, what's on the table, what can you get access now. I'm going to be dealing with people who are freelancers, self-employed, directors of companies, bigger companies. So we're going to cover all of those. I'm probably going to rabbit on, answer your questions for about half an hour, 40 minutes tonight. If you feel it's useful and you want a follow-up session, I'm going to have another one later on this week, and we'll just carry on dealing with this and other stuff as we need to. Perfect. So first of all, just as a few caveats here, there is 3 types of support that I've picked up on. You've got cash. Most of us have heard of this, cash grants. There's 2 levels of grant, up to 25 grand and 10 grand. There's 80%, which I'm getting a lot of calls on. So if you are employing staff or you happen to be an employee of your own company, and you're paying wages under PAYE, on paper there's an 80% discussion there about you'll get a rebate, a grant towards that. I'm going to tell you what I do know there, and introduce you to the term called furloughed workers, which sounds quite weird, and I'll talk to you about the criteria there. There's also what I call deferral. So if you've got debts to pay, whether it's in a personal capacity like your mortgages, where you've got VAT, self-assessment payments on account coming up, PAY, corporation tax, there's an option there to delay some of those. Some of them you're going to have to talk to HMRC directly. Some of them will be granted to you automatically. Thirdly, there's loan. My opinion would be there is an option to access loan through your existing lender. The government have agreed to support that with guarantees. The devil's in the detail. And depending on what your thoughts are, you may want to get all three of them. You may only want to go to one of them. You may decide that actually, for the time being, I can just about get through the next few weeks here, and I'll tap into it as and when I need to. And there are things that I would recommend that you look at straight away. So we've got a whole hodgepodge of things here. My start point is if you haven't done it already, and I've bored people to death with this here, sit down, take a deep breath, and just literally, even if it's a scrap of paper, figure out what you think is going to happen over the next few weeks here. We talked about cash flows before, so you can really understand how much money is going to come into your business and support your household, how much money is going to go out that household, what the gap is between the two of them, and then you can make a plan about what you need to get access for immediately, things that are going to be around the corner. So I've spoken to a lot of you already. Some of you are thinking, right, I've got money in the bank to see me through the next few weeks. Actually, what happens when it runs out? So for me, get a handle on your cash flow position. Usual thing, I publish a lot of stuff on the website. There's more stuff that we're going to hand out later on this week. We're working pretty frantically to get this out to you. So there's some practical stuff here. And if you need a catch up, we can look to organise one-to-ones or collective things. So that's where we start from. One word of warning, by the way. In times of crisis and panic, by the way, there's a great lot of people who want to help everybody. And I've seen a great deal of that amongst the people that I work with, amongst you guys. But there's also, unfortunately, a lot of charlatans, snake oil salesmen, and rip-off merchants and scammers who are going to prey on what's going on at the moment. So watch out for those emails that go around saying, we can tell you how to get the government funding, we can help you with X. There's a lot of shits out there who are going to basically try and fleece you. So you've got to be extra diligent, extra vigilant as well. For those of you who might be working at home, unfortunately, the IT security at home, I'm not an IT guy by any stretch. You need to make sure you've got adequate security systems at home to protect you from those sharks out there. So having said that, let's crack on. Just a quick sort of sound check. Is everybody okay with the speed at which I'm going? I know I can speak like a machine gun sometimes, so I want to make sure everyone's cool and with that. Perfect. If I don't see any raspberries coming out, I'll assume everything's fine. So let's talk about cash, first of all, in terms of what's out there. Now, I'm going to talk about if you run a company, so you're a limited company, or you're self-employed, or you're freelancers, they're all being mixed up here. There are certain things that won't be necessarily available to you. So if you're self-employed, i.e. you're not running through a limited company, then the law sees you as an individual. You're not an employee. Doesn't matter what you call yourself, and therefore things like statutory sick pay will be off the table. You will not be able to claim that. If you employ people, that's fine. You can pay them SSP because of the coronavirus, and as an employer, you can claim back 2 weeks worth of that. What I will say, by the way, the systems are still being built for that, so you will be able to access it eventually, but you won't get it right now as an employer. So if you are in that situation that you aren't able to claim statutory sick pay, you're self-employed, freelance or whatever, then you've got two choices. It's the benefit system. If any of you have got personal views about, I don't want to claim benefit for whatever reason, kick that into touch. We've all paid into the system. The system is there to support all of us as we go through this here. You've effectively got two types of benefits that you can access here. I've published the links to the government sites to look at. You've either got what's called ESA, which is based on how much national insurance you've actually paid into the system. Your flat rate doesn't count. So that's one thing you've got to go to. And the amount you're going to get is going to be equivalent, so the government have said, to statutory sick pay. So that's about 90 odd quid a week. The alternative, and the way you do this, is an online application. Having to go to a job centre is obviously not going to happen. You can apply online, and the government have relaxed the regulations about, having interviews, etc., etc. If ESA is not available to you, then there's universal credit. Again, it's subject to two things on universal credit: how much money you've saved. So it's a bit of a kicker. If you've got over 16 grand worth of savings, unfortunately, you will not be able to access universal credit here. So it's means tested universal credit, but there's a positive thing, if you can call it that. You're not going to retire on this money, by the way, but universal credit also means you can get access to helping with housing costs. You can get access to other benefits as well. And it's probably a bit of a mini lifeline to help you when there's nothing coming in, if that's the situation you find yourself. Now, if you're self-employed, the government typically say, we're going to have a look at what your earnings are, your income levels, and then we'll assess it on that basis. What they've said is we're not going to bother with that minimum income level, and therefore it's a lower threshold to be able to claim universal credit. My personal view, by the way, there's some great sites. In terms of the benefits system, I've got a good, reasonable working knowledge. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but anyone who knows Martin Lewis from the TV, of all the advisors I've seen in my times, Martin Lewis is great. His site is populated with background detail on benefits. And I've talked about universal credit. I've talked about ESA. There are other benefits you may be able to tap into. The actual claim, go onto the hmrc.gov site, check our blog. The link is in the last mailer we sent out. Go there, check, get it in there straight away. Universal credit, by the way, can take up to about 5 to 6 weeks to process. If you imagine the huge volume of people claiming, there's going to be a time delay. So, but get in there quickly. ESA, if you are going to get it, is paid every fortnight. So a bit of a sort of acceleration there. But if you're not sure, my view is make a claim. The worst that can happen is HMRC and all those bodies will say, go away, you're not entitled. So you need to do that sooner rather than later. And I know there's a lot of people who've managed to get the claims in and accelerate. So a bit of respite there. Self-employed, while we're talking about that, there's other things that you can also get. So you may, for example, get referral, and let's have a check on here. Yeah, Steve, I'll come on to that if you don't mind. I'll pick that up in a moment. So Steve's asking about wages and PAYE. If you don't mind, Steve, I'm going to address that in a moment. But that's a great question to ask. We'll go through that in a second. So the next thing I would suggest that you think about is the things like what they call the cash grants. Now, on paper, there's a cash grant, and the government, unfortunately, not all sectors are being treated the same. So the biggest focus for them at the moment, where there's cash on the table, is those who are what they call in the hospitality, leisure sector, and that covers a whole host of businesses here. So that covers cafes, theatres, art museums, believe it or not, galleries, live music venues, pubs, restaurants. Effectively, if you're in one of those, there are 2 levels of grants that are going to be available to you. Number one, you've got 25k on the table as a cash grant, and that's going to be effectively based on you occupying a premise of some description. So if you trade at home, by the way, so if you happen to be working from home, in the main, the cash grants that I'm referring to are going to be off the table. At the moment, they're not available to you if you work from home, subject to 1 or 2 exceptions. So that's quite, unfortunately, disappointing, but that's the way it is. So they're gearing it towards those people who have got a property, an office, a factory, something physical where they trade from it, and that's where the grants are going. So effectively, up to 51, was it between, I don't know, 15 and 51, what's called rateable value. You can check these numbers, or if you had a business rates bill, you'll get 25k. Over that, unfortunately, you don't get anything. Now, also, if you're one of those sectors, retail, hospitality, and again, that includes lots of things there as well, leisure, then if it's below the 15,000, you'll get a 10k cash grant. Now, also, while we're talking cash grants, If you are a small business, that you have to occupy, unfortunately, an office, a building, where basically the council will have sent you letters saying, this is your business rates that you owe us, but we're going to let you off something. So, but you've got to be in an arena where rates is being assessed by the local authority itself. If you are up to 15K, then you will get a 10 grand cash grant. Now, it's quite a natural question. If you say, well, hang on, what happens if I'm over that slightly? What I will be honest with you, the government have not announced what's happening. My view would be that might change if there's a bit of a stink created, but at the moment, it's off the table. Now, here's the thing you've got to be careful with. Most of these support systems here we're talking about, like grants, cash, is not going to be given out by the government themselves directly. There's a few where HMRC will be involved, and all of you who know who've ever dealt with HMRC, they do a pretty good job. They're fighting on the back foot, but don't expect a suitcase of cash anytime soon. It's on the cards. So for things like cash grants, it's the local authorities, and you've got to be practical here in the sense of the cash will be given by the government. The local authorities are going to dish it out there as well. They're not geared up at the moment. My guess would be you're probably going to be looking around about April time before any money actually trickles through there itself. So that might mean at the end, we talk about funding, overdrafts to get you through if you haven't got savings to do that. So that's the cash grants there. Now, let me pick up a point that Steve and a lot of you have asked me about is what happens. The government have talked about this, or you get 80%, we will reimburse you on wages of your staff. Now, let me just give you a bit more detail on what that means. Now, they introduced a very strange term here called furloughed staff. So let's talk about eligibility. I'll then talk about if I think you apply and qualify for that, and then we can talk about how you go about getting the money back there as well. So number one, you first of all got to have a payroll scheme going. Number two, what the government are trying to encourage is people not to lay people off, make them redundant. So they're what they call furloughed workers. So you're employing somebody, or it could be yourself, which I'll come back to in a second, and effectively they aren't coming to work. So they're not being sacked, they're still on the payroll. They're furloughed, but they mustn't be doing any work for you. Obviously, you've got to be paying them because this is what's called a reimbursement scheme. So you pay them zero wages, you're not going to get money back on top of that. The date that it kicks on from, by the way, is from the 1st of March 2020. They will pay it for 3 months currently. They may extend that. They may relax the rules later on. There's a lot of big organisations lobbying. So effectively, you've got to be a furloughed worker. Number two, it starts from the 1st of March 2020. And number three, by the way, if you happen to be in a situation where you employ people and their wages are good because they're getting bonuses or it's your company, then if they're earning, say, 3-4 grand a month, it's going to be capped based on what their wages were up to the 28th of February 2020. The maximum ceiling is up to 2.5, and that's what 80% is for. And it's a reimbursement scheme, by the way. Now, here's the caveat. That's what they say on paper. There are lots of things to work out, like what happens if my worker gets a second job? What do I do? At the moment, the way I've interpreted what they've said so far is they mustn't be working for you. I would interpret that as actually they're not working at all for anybody else. That may change. So assume if they're employed by you, they're not working for you because you haven't got the business, it's closed down. You carry on paying their wages, you've got to pay it out, you'll get it reimbursed, but it's going to be effectively an online system. There will be criteria. HMRC will want proof that they're genuine furloughed, but that's going to come on an online system they're actually currently building. And just to make life even more interesting, by the way, there's a lot of things they're talking about that aren't actually in law at the moment. So their policies, their announcements, they haven't been legally enforced yet. So again, that's going to be a bit of a stumbling block. But I would say, to be fair to everybody involved, they're rushing ahead, doing as much as possible. Okay, Karen, a good point here. I'll pick that up. Let me just pick that up about Karen, rented properties and self-employed. Now, unfortunately, here's the devil in the detail. And I'm going to deal with two things here. A rented property, the income from that is not classified perversely as self-employed. Now, don't get me wrong, I know you guys work very hard if you rent out property. If you give a tenant a rent holiday, you will not get that reimbursed. Now, effectively, if the individual tenant is falling on hard times, they can claim universal credit, for example. They will get some support with their rent. At the moment, the rental element in universal credit, by the way, has been uplifted. And depending where you are in the country, it's about 30% now of rental value gets factored into housing costs. There's a lot of other complications, like whether you've got a family, all that sort of things. But potentially letting, if I've understood that correctly, Karen, letting a rent deferral, you're not going to get reimbursed for that. Yeah, Melissa, that's a fair point. So if you've got part-time work and you're paying and they're still working for you, the way the legislation or the policies are announced is that's not going to be reimbursed. Okay, so unfortunately, and again, this may change in a couple of days, but as of literally half an hour ago, what I've checked is they mustn't be working full stop. There's no reference to they can work part-time, you just give them on reduced time. It's they're not working for you, they're not off the books, they're still on the payroll, you're still paying them, that's what you're going to get reimbursed. Now, again, that's a real dog's breakfast because it's like, you know, we want to keep the business going, we're still going to serve clients, we can't afford to have them on full-time. And the way it's structured at the moment, and again, it may change in the next couple of days, it refers to they must not be working. So does that answer your question, Melissa? And that's a commercial conundrum there. Yeah, Naomi, yeah, ESA, the £73, by the way, Naomi, for those of you who are claiming ESA, two things here. There is an ES online application form. The government have announced that they are going to put it up slightly to match the statutory sick pay, which is about 90 odd quid. If you're not eligible for ESA by then, that's based on a national insurance record. If you're not eligible to claim ESA, universal credit is what you're looking for. And in some instances, you can possibly claim potentially both. So you need to get on the thing. You can check your national insurance record on the online claim. Go through the process. The computer will either say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. Yeah, I think it would do, Melissa. So I'll come back to that detail. So if you need to put somebody in part-time salary to save costs, effectively, for what you've paid them to date, yeah, and they're still working for you, that's not likely to be reimbursed at the moment. If you need to go on quiet time, so the government have said, you know, only essential workers, well, it's a bit limited. I mean, I've, under cover of darkness, come into the office, as I will be now going forward until I get arrested, just to keep things going. At the moment, it would seem that if you're having people working for you, even on reduced time, it's unlikely at this moment you're going to get anything reimbursed. No problem, no. And listen, everybody, it's really challenging at the moment. So a lot of the immediate, here's the money, we need it right now. Systems have not been set up. Some of this stuff is not going to kick in until the 6th of April. There's going to be a massive queue, I would suggest, of people claiming things. So it may be, for the time being, that it's more of a deferral thing that you do. Now, let me just come back to the last point, by the way. For some of you who might have your own companies, the company puts you through a payroll scheme and thinks, can I actually claim that? Now, here's the conundrum. My view would be, there is something called, you might have heard it floating around, called IR35, which I'm not going to go into tonight, but basically, if you're under that umbrella, it's unlikely, based on current representations, that you'll be covered. So in other words, what that means is typically you're somebody who only works for one engager, you typically work for an agency, HMRC don't see you as a genuine employee. If you're caught under that thing, you're not classified as a worker, and therefore it's unlikely you're going to get any reimbursement. That would be the view I take. However, if you run a non-IR35 company, which a lot of you will do, so you've got lots of different clients, you run what I would call a genuine business. Not that I'm saying that contractors aren't. Some of you have got, so you know, you've got a varying number of clients, you take risks, all that stuff. Then my interpretation so far, you will be eligible to claim your wage costs back here. So again, that detail is what constitutes a worker. But I would not completely say no to those of you who are running companies, are not under the IR35 umbrella. If you're not working, that's the key thing, and you're still paying yourself, then that is subject to being a claim, of which 80%, but remember it's a claim, nothing's set up at the moment. So if you're not working and you're paying yourself nevertheless, then I think two things that come into this. One, if you're paying yourself the normal wage and not SSP, I would say at this moment in time, you can claim 80% of that back, subject to HMRC saying no. So don't dismiss that completely. Yes, Melissa. So Melissa's asked a question which I think is going to be applicable to all of you. If you're a director of a company, the key thing is you're not working. So if you're self-isolating, you're on lockdown, but you're still drawing down a wage, which is going through the payroll, then my interpretation is that 80% is going to count. You can claim that back. And that's based on current interpretation. Secondly, let me come back onto it. If you're already on a tax credit, claiming it at the moment, your tax credit would have been calculated based on the level of income that you're going through. Now, my understanding is that you can reassess that, go back. If you've had a loss of income, then there's no harm reassessing that claim there as well. Again, I'm being a bit vague on some of the answers, by the way. A, because the detail hasn't been announced, and B, I'm straying into territory, which is not my normal expertise. I'm trying to make sure that I cover those things here. So I would suggest when it comes to a more detailed claim here, you are able, in most cases, to reassess your universal credits, your ESA claims. Go back on there, check out Martin Lewis. I'll publish some more links after this broadcast itself. I'm going to make sure I've answered most of the questions. So the comments so far, before I carry on, are there any other questions? So keep putting them into the comments box and I'll do the best I can to answer them. Apologies for my going all over the place, by the way. I'm trying to read the comments and the keep an eye on the camera here. Everybody okay so far, by the way, with speed, pace? Perfectly. Hi, Karen, just coming on there. This is being recorded, by the way, Karen. Anyone who's missed it, so you're able to play it back. Again, you might want to grab yourself a drink and listen to it. What we've talked about cash grants. So if you're working at home, you're not going to get it. That would be my view. If, however, you split your house up, it's the local authority got you in their clutches, basically. So they know that you work at home and you've got exemption, you're going to be in that. Because remember, the local authority will be doing the claim. You won't have to claim it. They'll be going for their business rates records. They'll be saying, yeah, this is a registered business. Yes, there's business rates, but we've let them off, or we're charging them this much. That's the first thing. If you're not in the spotlight, then you're not going to get any cash grant based on what we've got so far. Universal credits, check them out. Remember, the worst thing that can happen is you won't get anything. But don't sit on your hands, because these things will take some time to process, get out to you there as well. And don't delay is certainly what I would suggest. If you've got split companies, there's nothing I've seen at the moment that says you can only get it under from one company. So what they'll be looking at, again, from what I've seen, is if you've got 2 or 3 companies and you've got 2 or 3 different payrolls, that's 2 or 3 different employers, and therefore you should be eligible to get the grants from each one. Again, the devil is in the detail. HMRC may, because unfortunately there will be some people taking advantage here, none of you guys here, by the way, but I've read in other forum, people going back, making things up, trying to, understandably play the system, so to speak. And in most details when it comes to it, they may talk about connected parties there as well. I've seen nothing by that suggests that way. So pay yourself off work, you still put yourself through the payroll, and that's the thing you've got to weigh up. It's the commercial pressure of saying, actually, I can't physically afford to take a wage out because there's no money. If you don't take anything out, you don't put anything through the payroll, then you're not going to get any reimbursement. So again, if you've got a mixed bag here, by the way, you're self-employed and you've also got rental properties, then I would say, look, go on the portals, go through it there, because obviously if you're claiming as a self-employed individual, most of the claim forms will say, obviously, who are you? What are you claiming? You're claiming for the first time. What's your occupation? Put all your details in there. They'll ask you then your sources of income. And your sources of income will be, obviously, typically under the old working tax credit rules, which are being phased out, replaced by universal credit, is what's your self-employed profits, what's your income from alternative income like rental property, savings, etc., etc. It puts that all together and it then says you get nothing, you get something, or you get this there as well. Again, you're not going to retire on the amounts of money, but the advantages are they kick into other support that you can access as well. So the short answer to that, everybody, just do the claim. If you haven't done it before, don't please listen to idle chatter in forum, by the way. There's a lot of rubbish that I've heard publicised all over the internet saying it's X, it's Y, it's Z. Most people don't actually know yet, by the way. So there's a lot of stuff we have no idea on because it's moving very rapidly. There's a lot of stuff that we do know that's already been published, where they're either relaxing the rules or saying you can do that. And there's a lot of stuff that's question mark there as well. So for me, if there's those things at the moment, get there and go through them. Cash grants, as I said, it's going to be next year. And again, it's currently 10 and 25. If you are in that hospitality leisure bracket, by the way, then there's going to be what's called rates relief. So you won't have rates to worry about at all for next year. If you've already been invoiced by the local authority, by the way, then they're going to be rebilling you. If you have paid them up front, they're going to be rebilling you later on. So again, it's going to be interesting because a lot of the local authority are going to be, like everybody pretty much, are going to be self-isolating, shut down there as well. So that's going to be interesting. There's another thing as well, by the way, everybody. We're going to talk about deferrals in a moment. So the old compliance things like sending documents in, there's nothing to say you can stop that. So let me talk on now about delays, things that you can delay. And yeah, so Matthew's asked about if you pay your staff this week as weekly. My short answer is yes. If they're not turning up for work, so Matthew, I know if you don't mind me sharing it, you'll be in one of the industries that are closed. Effectively, if you're paying your staff still, that will be reimbursable. When it's reimbursable, my personal view about when even for my own businesses, I've lost business, I'm running on a skeleton staff, I've made a commitment, and that's just me, that I'm still going to be paying staff. They're not going to suffer as a result of this. Realistically, I'm not factoring getting the money back in until probably about end of April, May time. If it comes in early, fantastic. If it doesn't, it just helps on the planning assumptions about what you've got to do. Yeah, Matthew, I've got, fully there, 100%. That's the dilemma you've got. So the sooner the government kick in with the IT systems, the sooner it will be. And I would suggest, by the way, Matthew's raised a fantastic point, which all of you have. Here's the conundrum. Ultimately, the one thing that's going to determine whether we all get through this is lots of things, okay? But for me, from a numbers perspective, is how much cash do you have access to keep the wheels turning? Once you run out of cash, once you run out of access to cash, doesn't matter if your business is not making the profit you want to, it's the end of the road. So for me, the start point is a cash flow. I'm going to be doing a live lesson on this probably next week, if not the week before, and I've got some other stuff to share with you. I would just say, even if you do it on a back of a cigarette paper, or that's probably not the right appropriate thing to do, even if you sketch it out, money in, money out. We published a blog, by the way, where I've just given you an illustration of what to do. Sketch it out, and you can see where the pressure points actually are. Now, let's come talk about debt, things you can delay. So there are things, if you've got obligations coming up with HMRC, there are two things they said you don't have to make the claim, they'll be done automatically for you. So VAT, between around about mid-March, end of June, so if you've done a VAT return, you've got VAT to pay, then you don't have to do anything, there's nothing to pay, it's delayed until next March. You can, if you wish to, pay it, so you may have a strong cash flow that says, actually, I can afford to pay that VAT bill. And the reason you might want to think about that is, remember, these are merely delays of debt. You still have to pay them, but you've got until next March, so that buys you some time. But bear in mind, they're not eliminating the debt. They're just saying, we don't want the money now. The other advantage is, by the way, they're not going to charge you interest on that delayed debt. The other thing they are automatically going to allow you to do is delay any payments you've got on account that are payable by the 31st of July 2020. So, two things is what we know. If you're self-employed, so it doesn't apply if you've got rental property, doesn't apply if you've got an individual, you've got a portfolio. If you're self-employed, you've done your tax return, whether it's done by me or yourself, and it says, by the way, in January they're gone, we want this much money, and you've got what's called a payment on account, which is an instalment. You would have paid or should have paid the January instalment. If you've got a one coming up in July, the government have said, don't worry about that, guys. Obviously, they didn't say that. I'm telling you that. They say it's delayed. You pay us by the end of January 2021. No interest will be paid. You can, if you wish, to pay it straight away, but you can delay that. So for me, if you've got that in your back of your mind, thinking I'm worried about paying the tax or VAT, you've got some breathing space in there. Now, the other things, you might have PAYE, you might have corporation tax, you may have other taxes to pay. Now, there is nothing mandated for the government to say, we're going to waive that or delay that. So to do that, you're going to have to do what's called time to pay. Now, there's a dedicated number. Again, I've published that on the blog. So if you want to check out the website at the end, by the way, there's some blogs, there's some stuff on there which will be useful to you guys. And again, be patient with me. I'm going to publish some more updates here, but there's a focus number we published on the website, or go HMRC dedicated line, find it on there. The number's going to be quite busy. So, but you know, a lot of us have got time on our hands, unfortunately. So give them a call. And if you think I'm worried about finding the money, the government have pretty much said to HMRC, look, be flexible. It's a case-by-case basis. They cover their asses on that one. What that basically means is, if you've not filed your tax return, if you've had problems paying it on time, you've not honoured them, there is a likelihood, not a guarantee, they're going to say, well, actually, we're not going to cut you any slack. But there is a time to pay, so delaying that debt is an option. Yes, the answer is, if you've already deferred, so you've already spoken to them. So two things, a couple of you good questions. If you're paying your VAT by direct debit, then in theory, government, HMRC have said you don't have to do anything. Now, if you're cautious, because HMRC have been known to mess up sometimes, you might want to say, do you know what, just as a precaution, I'm going to cancel the direct debit, then do it. In theory, you shouldn't have to. So HMRC systems should say, we're due to collect a direct debit on this time, don't bother collecting it. If you're thinking, actually, I'm not sure if they do that, and if they take the money, it's a real pain in the bottom to get any money back from HMRC. So therefore, you might, as a comfort thing, to say, do you know what, my VAT's due in this period, I don't really trust that to happen, so I'm going to cancel the direct debit, and I'm going to reinstate it later on. That would be my practical advice. So will self-assessment return payments that can be postponed to January? Yeah, so any payments you delay, by the way, so if you delay the July 2020 payment on account, that will be due by 31st of January 2021 with whatever your 1920 tax return will be. Interest won't be paid on that delay. So again, you might want to think, do you know what? Things are really tight at the moment. I've got other things I can juggle because I want to keep workers on. I want to do this. I want to do that. I've still got to engage with customers. I can't stop all lines of communication. You know, so it's a real, even though I'm working at home, I've still got to talk to customers. So I've still got to pay money out, blah, blah, blah. Then what you might say is I'll delay it till August, September. Things get a bit quicker and I'm going to pay it off. Or I might want to pay a little bit off each month. So that's the options you've got. But effectively, if you say, no, I'm going to wait until next January, remember, you're going to add that onto whatever you owe in January 2021. Does that answer your question, Kate, and everybody else? Okay, let me just carry on. So now that's the deferral debt. There's a few more things I'm going to throw into the mix, by the way. Now, when you do your cash flow for your business, obviously you're going to have to think about what you need for yourselves. Now, I just finished it off. I've got a personal survival budget I've put together, which I'll share with you. I'm just going to test it. It should be available for Friday latest. So you can look at your household spend, because the two are connected. your household spend and your business spend, you want to make sure they talk to each other. So if you've got mortgages to pay, pretty much the vast majority of established lenders, as I call that, have got systems set up. It's a mixture of you either call them or it's online. So I know, for example, because I've read the forums and had questions, Santander, online application, pretty straightforward. So you can get what's called a mortgage holiday. Now, this is not a holiday as we know it. They're not going to let you off it. All that happens is they shove those payments towards later on. So what that would mean is, if you think, do you know what, I just can't afford to pay the mortgage at the moment, it's too much pressure, most of the mortgage companies and the banks and the lenders will cut you slack, and pretty much, I'll be very surprised if they don't, most of them I would expect to give you a mortgage holiday or a loan holiday. However, those payments are going to be added on to the future. So they've all said, again, if you check out Martin Lewis, he's got the list of all the lenders. From what I've seen as well, mortgage holidays tick. If you've got rent to pay to the landlord, talk to them. And just as a general principle, by the way, we're doing the best we can to pay all our suppliers on time. Everyone's got their own way of doing these things. If you need a payment holiday, the biggest thing you've got to do is have those conversations with your suppliers. It puts their mind at rest. You could have customers that owe you money. You know, it's all about conversations here, because as you'll probably know from your own businesses, is if you don't talk to people and just hide your head under the ground, then they're going to get slightly irritated there as well. So in these current situations, figure out what the cash flow position is looking like. Thinking, I can pay this, I've got this coming in, that's pretty okay. Once you know what you deal with, then you can decide, I've got to delay this, I can pay this, you know, I'm going to get this money in quickly, but you've got to actually do that as well. Yeah, the grant, good question. When I use the word grant, by the way, it's not a loan facility. So if you are eligible for the grant, you'll get the cash, that's it. You don't have to pay it back. So think of it as a donation from British public going into your pocket. So it's free, but we don't know. No, the grants are paid tax-free. There's no interest. There's no repayment. They're a one-off payment. But what we don't know is whether the local authority are going to have it as a single lump to you or paying it over a period of time. But if you do get a grant and you're eligible, and that's if you are based with a property, office, shop or whatever, if it's given to you and it's the local authority who will make that decision, you do not pay it back. It's all yours, no interest, nothing else. Yeah, it's a good point, Melissa. I think everyone's in this together, by the way. So again, all I was saying, Melissa's raised a very good point there. Talking to people is likely to get you more goodwill here. Okay, so you've got to really think about, if you speak to the authorities like HMRC, they will typically ask you to go through what's your cash flow, what's your obligations. If you don't, then, you know, so just factor that in. So with all this panic going on, all of you in business, myself included, we're in a slightly different position to people who are workers, employees only, because our mindsets are going to be stronger. And it's a really scary thing at the moment, by the way. So I appreciate all the anxiety, all the stuff that's being thrown at us. So we're just going to get to grips with it. We're going to still think about business continuity. You're going to think about, what's my mindset saying? Do I have the strength to carry on? All those sorts of things. And you've still got in your brain, run a business there as well. And I fully embrace that and understand that. But, you know, that's what's going to happen if you want your business to carry on. Now, other things like deferrals, so you can delay some debt. There is a loan guarantee scheme, by the way. So let me just explain that. Now, the way it works, just like with the cash grants, in principle, the government, through the British Bank, have said, British Bank, we want you to pump prime and chuck loads of money into the big established banks. There are 40 lenders, by the way, that have signed up to this loan scheme. It's called the some support line. I can't remember the official name. My brain's a bit saturated with names and terms, but basically it's where the British Bank have said to all the established lenders, there are 40, by the way. Again, we published details on the latest, I think on the last blog, is from all of I know of your businesses, it'll be extremely unusual if your bank isn't in there. Now, here's the reality. What the company have said is, and for me, loans, and this applies to overdraft facilities as well, by the way, or loan holidays, is if you go to your bank and say, look, I've never had an overdraft before, I need an overdraft of X for the next 3 months. Or I've got obligations here. I want to carry on trading. I want to do all this, but I just don't have the cash. I've checked, the grants coming in. I've checked this. I've checked that. I need to borrow money. Money being borrowed, by the way, should be your last resort because it's just extra debt that you might not need. So I would probably explore an overdraft facility because it's temporary. It might be a temporary solution, and overdrafts can always be turned into loans. But without knowing your particular circumstances, that's what you've got. Now, what's going to happen is banks, when you go for a loan, will look at you. You say, I want to borrow this much money, and they will put you through what's called a risk profiling exercise. So they go, okay, let's have a look at your business. There's going to be a process they'll put you through. So they might say, we want to have a look at depending how big the loan is, we want to have a look at your business plan. We might want to see management accounts or just fill this form in. So they'll have procedures. They'll get that information, and somebody, typically a computer these days, will make a decision on how much risk they think there is in lending money to your business. Now, what the government has said via the British Bank is, banks, we will guarantee on a default 80% of that money. What that means is, in principle, you think, brilliant. Okay, the risk appetite, the outlook is going to be much less. My experience so far, by the way, is not as straightforward. If you don't need a great deal, it might be lower, but you still have to go through an application process. And, banks being banks, don't expect an immediate answer, but it's there. The risk element is much lower. You'll get what's called an interest holiday on it as well. And also it will kick in if you've got existing loans, then, that potentially comes under the loan guarantee scheme as well. Absolutely. Look, here's how I would look at these things. Melissa's asked about, would I advise getting a loan if it's interest-free as a safety net, or we absolutely need it? This is why I would say the start point for me, before I carry it, is the first thing I would always do is to sit down and say, right, I need to look at my cash flow for my business. And which basically says, over the next either few weeks or a few months, I would typically go for a 3 to 6 month horizon. I'm quite sad, by the way, because I do mine over a year and I update it quite regularly, not because I've not got a life, but just because there's quite a lot going on. You've got clients with different profiles, different obligations. And what it says is, in the month of March, what's going to come into the business, what goes out. And you repeat that. You work on what do you actually know. So what can you not get any wiggle room over? And I would just paint the picture or how you see your business looking at. When you look at that, then you think, actually, I've got a big commitment in the month of April, but actually I can talk to the suppliers and I can shift some of that repayment to a later month. Actually, what I know is coming in, because I've still got contracts that I've got to serve. As far as I know, I can still go and deliver them. I've got a bit of income coming in. So that's what you start with first of all. When you've decided what you can delay, what you can accelerate, what you can try and cut down on. So this might be the opportunity to think, I've got all those website subscriptions. I don't actually need them. I might bin them. Make a decision based on what's good for the long term of your business there as well. Now, if there is a big shortfall and you think, I've checked everywhere else, let me go for a short-term loan, then do it. If your businesses, you believe in them and you've all got great businesses, this is, for me, a temporary. How long temporary is, I've got no idea. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months, but it doesn't necessarily mean the doors are closed and that's over. People will still want to buy the stuff that you do. People still love what you do. All it is, it's a temporary shutdown situation, but the world will get over this craziness, hopefully sooner rather than later. Right, let's see, what have we not covered? Let's have a look at my little ticker tape to remind me. So we've got eligibility, we've got cash grants, the employer grant, self-employed, business rates, we talked about that, delayed debt, loans and benefits. Guys, is there anything I've not covered that you've got or answered a question on that you want to throw into the mix? My pleasure. So listen, I feel what you're saying, that Matthew, no problem at all. Anybody else, you've got questions, don't worry. Now, if they're detailed prescriptive by they and they relate to your individual circumstances, I'm not going to discuss them, obviously, on a live broadcast. Drop me a line. We're all running on a skeleton staff, by the way, but I'm doing my best to get back to everyone pretty quickly. If you've got any other questions you think I haven't answered straight away, then just chuck it into the mix on the comments. And if I haven't dealt with them now, I'll have a look at it, get more specifics if we can, and I can share that later on. Now, just a couple of questions before we wrap up. I'll keep this on for a few more moments. Would you find another one of these broadcasts useful to keep it going? Not just on the COVID-19, but just generally going forward. I mean, I do them in other areas. Have you found it quite a positive experience in terms of logging on, it coming through? I know we had a bit of an issue and challenge with the sound. I occasionally look at the camera, not as the case is. And there's a bit of a time delay. So let me just check I've got all these questions. That's it. I think I've answered most of them. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Great. So I said, if you've got specifics that I haven't covered, then throw it into the mix. Listen, all I can say, guys, thanks for all your support. I know it's a real tough time. We'll do our best to keep sharing with you. So obviously, those of you who are clients, if you've got specific questions or challenge or issues, whatever, we'll obviously reach out to you, reach out to us. I've had a word with our wonderful credit controller. So those of you who are clients, obviously, a lot of you will know Serena. We've spoken. Obviously, I don't get involved with credit control these days. Obviously, we still need to keep the wheels turning, but obviously, we're going to extend our credit terms, if it's going to help you out of the hole as well. Obviously, a lot of stuff that we're going to do, don't worry about having to pay for it as such. When things quieten down or whatever, we can have that conversation. No problem at all. So listen, if anything comes to you after this broadcast, chuck it back in as a comment. I'm not going to answer literally within 5 minutes. I've got a few more things to wrap up tonight. If you know anybody else, by the way, I would say it's probably Ishi. That's a good question. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you an email that I've got specific to use, so my inbox doesn't get flooded, so I'm likely to see it. I'm just typing in an email address here, by the way. I think this one I've just set up in the last few weeks. I can type, that is. I will not get a job as a typist. Would you believe that I actually learned typing in shorthand when I was younger? So that's clients at... Right. So I've just posted an email address. Show that. Just there. I think I've spelled it correctly. If you can see it on the screen. So if you make a note of that, I think we'll be on the live broadcast anyway. Just to avoid my inbox getting clogged up, I do check it. I'm getting about 300-400 emails a day. Some of them are just rubbish, but I just don't want yours to be buried. If you don't hear from me, by the way, as a general rule of thumb, we're getting systems set up so I always get the contact, but we're going to have a different focal point. Don't think I'm ignoring you. Just, follow it up, and, we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible. And so we are running on a skeleton staff, but I'm going to be battling the barricades and the police wearing my chemical suit to come in. I know you guys are really worried, so hopefully this is, put your mind at rest. If you like this, what we've said, by the way, obviously vanity comes into mind. Obviously, we'd like any comments, feedback, all that sort of thing. That would be really good, so we can widen it. If you know anyone in your network, by the way, you think might benefit from stepping in or listening to them, steer them towards us and tend to log on. We just want to help as many people. I'm speaking to a bunch of people in different groups, by the way, from, I won't tell you what they are. So groups outside of ones I normally deal with. But I think at this point in time, a lot of people still need your services. So don't forget that. Make sure you keep communicating with them, keep them engaged. Not everybody's shut down. If some of you are going into alternative avenues, by the way, thinking of different ways of running your business, I'm teaming up with a couple of experts here. I won't give you details now, but we'll announce ways to, if you are what they call pivoting, thinking of developing new revenue streams and all the rest of it, there'll be some resources and help coming on at some point there as well. So listen, stay safe. If you've stocked up your larders, you've got your rice, your brown rice, and your drinks cabinet full, that's all you need. Obviously, make sure you're not more than 2 meters away from somebody. I'm not laughing because I'm taking it seriously. I think at a time like this, you're going to keep your mindset as strong as possible. Try not to over stress. Keep positive. not naive. This shit will eventually quieten down. So listen, have a good evening, everyone. I'll speak to you very soon. If you've got any other follow-up questions, find my way. And basically, what do they say? Be hippiest my Jimi Hendrix shirt. Let's close that down. So basically, look after yourselves, take care, and stay positive. Right, speak to you all guys later. So that's the broadcast over. And if I can figure out how to end it, there we go.